Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Direwall.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Facts are real. Welcome to Inkstained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. Eliana Johnson, you are in fine fettle. Your fettle has never been finer. You are recovered from your illness. You're back on the attack. I love to see it.
Yes.
I can feel the enthusiasm pouring out of you.
I am so happy to be not sick anymore.
That's what we like. That's what we like to see.
So happy. And back in person.
Heck yeah, here we are.
So apologies for recording a day late last week, but we're back to our regular schedule.
Inkstained Wretches.
Yes.
Now more wretched than ever.
Yes. Okay. Front page. We got a stacked, loaded front page.
Beautiful.
Starting with Biden and Trump have agreed to debate.
Mm-hmm.
And the New York Times writes, why Biden wanted to debate Trump early and why Trump said yes. Proposing the earliest general election debate in the history of television is a way to mitigate the risks of placing an 81-year-old president on stage live for 90 minutes. By agreeing to 2 debates rather than the traditional 3, the Biden campaign is limiting his exposure. By scheduling the clashes further out from Election Day, both candidates will have opportunities to recover should they stumble. By accepting Mr. Biden's deal for 2 debates, Mr. Trump lost almost all his leverage to demand more, even as his campaign asked for monthly contests and Mr. Trump said he had accepted a Fox News debate in October. The Biden campaign made clear that the president would participate in only 2. And I think the background we should provide is that the 2 candidates have jettisoned the Commission on Presidential Debates, which typically schedules 4 debates, right? Three
presidential,
and the vice
presidential
presidential debates.
Yeah.
And in September and October, and these are going to begin next month.
That's right.
So it's a lot earlier. My quick take on this, but I'm interested in your thoughts, is that these candidates are so well known to the public. This is the 3rd time Trump has been on a general election ballot, and Biden's run for president, every year since 1980. That I don't think they're likely to matter that much, except in the event that there's some major catastrophic moment for Biden, in which case, I understand the positive spin the New York Times is trying to put on it. However, Trump will be using that in commercials for, if Biden has a senior moment, that'll be replayed over and over and over and over again.
Let's start with the baseline. If in 2020 Donald Trump had said that he would not abide by the Commission on Presidential Debates and do the Commission on Presidential Debates, what would have happened? There would still be nuclear raid sirens blaring in Washington, D.C. about Donald Trump violating the norms and refusing to be accountable, and it would be a full-blown freakout. And I would say, by the way, deservedly so. Deservedly so for an incumbent president not to be the first one since Ronald Reagan to not submit to the Commission on Presidential Debates, which grew out of, by the way, the 1980 election. We got the Commission on Presidential Debates because there was one presidential debate, general election in 1960, and there was one in, maybe 2 in 1976. There was one in 1980. And then after that, it was decided that it would be in the mutual interest of both parties to have a mechanism for dealing with the debates so they didn't have to have a debate about debates. Incumbents don't want to debate generally. And so this was a way to do it. So from 1984 until 2020, this was the norm. And how did Biden get out of that? How did he escape? And the answer is, do you remember when the Republican National Committee dropped out preemptively of the Commission on Presidential Debates, which was just impossibly stupid? It was a real moment of, I'm sorry, what? Because of course, when you're the out party, you want more debates and you want maximal leverage for debates. So they preemptively dropped out, which gave Biden the chance to get out of it himself. And then as soon as Trump and the Republicans realized, oh no, we need debates, we have to have debates, and it will be good for us to have debates, then they start, well, I'll debate you anytime, anywhere, any place. Now, what the New York Times reports that's very interesting is that there was a back channel deal between the two campaigns to come up with these two debates. So one on CNN, which I assume was Biden's choice, and that will be moderated by
Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. And it won't have an audience.
And I don't think either will, right?
So I didn't realize that about the ABC debate.
So the ABC debate will be, and I apologize, ABC, that I don't know the name of the other anchor, but it will be.
It's Lindsay Davis and David Muir.
Muir. It will be those two, and I think neither will have an audience. So the two campaigns negotiated this out, and then it's splurped out in a matter of, an hour or whatever. Biden said, I'll do it. Trump said, I accept, and I've accepted this from ABC, and Biden said, I'll do it. So this was a performative expression of the negotiations that had taken place behind the scenes. The advantage not mentioned in all of this has been, what's the number one reason for Biden to not have the Commission on Presidential Debates? Yes, he's going to get one out of the way early, so there is time to recover.
He's getting both of them out of the way early.
Relatively, yeah. The September one is when they would typically start, and now it's when they're going to end. So that's works to his advantage.
Those debates also had audiences,
right? And I'm glad that there are not going to be audiences. The audiences are a bad idea. They don't help, and let them be locked in an airless crypt. Where their words hang.
I like no audience. I think it's great.
You having had to do the work of moderating a debate with an audience, so you definitely
I'm
get
pro no audience.
Yeah, and by the way, I would like to have seen you do the general election debate. I would have liked to have seen that too. So
I'm sure the Biden campaign would have
say,
eagerly agreed
we're
to that.
suggesting Eliana Johnson as our debate moderator. So what does Biden get out of the deal? He gets, and I think the folks at ABC, David Muir, they have worked harder to do more outreach to MAGA viewers and Trump-leaning folks, I think, than the other networks have. But Biden ends up with interlocutors who would not have been considered probably acceptable to the Commission on Presidential Debates, right? Too young, too ambitious, too mainstreamy, too whatever, because normally they're looking for like Chris Wallace or people of that mold. Here's the best thing Biden gets out of this. Viewership will be a fraction of what it would be for the CPD debates.
That's definitely true, but I read that they are still entertaining whether to provide a stream to all the networks. So it's an open question whether and what that means essentially is that CNN would host the debate, but provide a feed of it to anybody else who wants to pick it up. So conceivably, it could air both on CNN and Fox News. That will not happen because CNN wants to sell the exclusive advertising they get from airing it.
They want to sell the exclusive advertising, and will their competitors give? So the difference with the Commission on Presidential Debates, for 2 hours of prime time for, 50, 60 million viewers.
Right, exactly.
The only thing other than the State of the Union that gets roadblock coverage is the Commission on Presidential Debates every 4 years. And it forces the country to say, okay, I guess if the CSI Dubuque is not on tonight, the election must be going on. Do you think that NBC and CBS will give over 2 hours of their prime time?
No way.
To here's Jake Tapper. Here's a person. Here's a competitor. Why don't you watch him for 2 hours? I think it unlikely. I don't know what will happen, but I think Biden also got a chance to step on the viewership for this, especially given the fact that America is sick and tired and exhausted of these two candidates, as you said initially. You know, no one is going to say, I want to get a better idea of what these cats are really like.
I think the debates are basically only downside for Biden. Yeah. I don't really think Trump can do anything that would move the needle for him. He did, quote unquote, lose to Biden in 2020 when he debated him. He came on too strong, but I just don't think there's anything he can do that would really hurt him.
Trump lost to himself in the first debate in 2020. And he chewed the scenery and was just, a maniac. And one thing to remember, we should bear in mind, Trump did not do any of the Republican primary debates. He never tuned up, and he has lived in a bubble, not just since the White House, but then the White House bubble. So it's been a long time since he's faced adversarial questioning, right? And he doesn't do many. He did his Time Magazine audition for Time Magazine Man of the Year, but he doesn't do much in the way of interviews. So he will be rusty. They'll both be rusty, and it should be a fairly miserable spectacle. So congratulations, America.
I'm excited to watch them, honestly.
I obviously I want to watch, and I want to see like Biden's thing about getting all jacked up and psyched up and like, we're going to do it. And yeah, bring it on, pal, and all that stuff. And
then you see that there were 5 supercuts in his 17-second video because he couldn't get it out.
Yeah.
Well, our next item is of a piece with this, which is the White House trying to block the release of the audio of Biden's interview with the special counsel, claiming executive privilege over this. And the AP reports the White House has blocked the release of the audio from Joe Biden's interview with the special counsel about his handling of classified documents, arguing that Republicans only wanted the proceedings to chop them up and use them for political purposes. The dispute over access to the recordings is at the center of a Republican effort to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress, and more broadly to hinder the Democratic president's reelection effort in the final months of the closely contested campaign. It's interesting because the transcript of this is already out.
Right.
And it undercut the White House's claims that the special counsel, Robert Hur, was
asking him about his son's death.
Was being mean, basically, and raising things out of nowhere, and showed that it was Biden himself, as the special counsel had said, who injected Beau Biden's name into the interview. And of course, Republicans want the audio out to show how confused and senile Biden sounded in these interviews.
But I don't believe that it would be bad for me politically is a sufficient reason to exert executive privilege, right? And this is a extraordinarily dubious claim that the president should be shielded from political attacks from his enemies, and there's no national security argument, there's no executive privilege argument for to state the obvious. The reason that we have executive privilege is so that the president can deliberate freely with his advisors and that people can offer him frank assessments without fear that it will later come out, right? So in order to protect the president's ability for executive action, that he needs some secret space in which to operate. We've already read the transcript. There's no national security consideration. There's no executive privilege consideration. And for them to just nakedly say it would be bad for him politically to do, therefore we declare, this is like Michael Scott in The Office, I declare bankruptcy. I declare executive privilege because of this. Media organizations should fight this, right? Just on
I
principle.
won't hold my breath, Chris.
Well, they should do it.
I won't hold my breath.
This
on
should
that.
go. This should go to court.
This is actually quite similar to the case that the Free Beacon is fighting in Arizona for the release of Ruben Gallego's divorce records, where Gallego filed for divorce in a county in which he did not live, which is against the law in Arizona, 100 miles away from where he lives. And the reason that he says that, unlike every other divorce proceeding in the state, these things should remain sealed, and even the existence of the case on the docket was sealed, is that he is a high-profile politician. He is claiming privileges not available to anybody else, and it is the same argument. This would be bad for me politically.
It would be bad politically.
It would be bad for me politically. And by the same token, I am not holding my breath for the mainstream media in Arizona to begin covering this case.
To join you?
Yeah.
The Washington Post let's stipulate for the record my skepticism about fact-checking is a subset of journalism. But Glenn Kessler, the fact checker at the Washington Post.
This was like an everybody and his brother fact check.
Yeah. What did he say?
Biden said that when he took office, inflation was 9%. And thanks to his hard-won efforts and excellent policies, he has brought it down to 3%.
What Biden is saying, no, the true thing to say was, inflation was going to go up no matter what, right? Because of the COVID spending, it was going to go up for a variety of reasons, and it went up everywhere in the world. And then, of course, Biden made it worse, helped make it worse, because there was an additional bailout package. There was more. They pumped.
He poured,
right.
Yes, of course.
They pumped more money in, and that's what.
In the Inflation Reduction Act.
Right. So they did another round of stimulus. They did a bunch of infrastructure spending. They dumped a bunch more money into the economy, and that's what took it from whatever percentage it would. If Joe Biden had come in and not helped lead to more deficit spending, inflation still was going to go up because of what Trump and the bipartisan agreement on massive spending before. But he made it worse. And the question was put to Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House this week, which was, is he mistaken or is he lying? Right? Does he not? Because this is the position Biden finds himself on a host of issues, which is normally what the president can say is like, I must have mixed up the dates or whatever. I'm not lying. But Biden doesn't want to say I was confused. He doesn't want to say that I am what did Robert Hur call him? A well-meaning confused. Yeah, well-meaning elderly man with memory problems.
Yeah, yes.
He does not want to be that. So it's that's that.
All right.
Speaking of false claims. Yes.
Jen Psaki in her new book arguing that Biden actually did not check his watch in a ceremony for fallen troops. In her book, and this is from Axios, in her book, Say More, Psaki writes that the president looked at his watch only after the ceremony had ended. Moments later, he and the First Lady headed toward their car, end quote. Psaki, now a star anchor at MSNBC, who has described herself as a journalist, oh God, writes that Biden's critics were engaged in, quote, misinformation and used the image to make him, quote, appear insensitive, concerned only about how much time had passed, end quote. The story stands out because her account of Afghanistan is one of the few parts of the book where Psaki goes deep behind the scenes of the Biden White House. Reality check, Psaki's new account is at odds with fact checks at the time, news agencies' photos from the ceremony at Dover Air Force Base, and on-the-record statements from Gold Star families who were there. You know what my favorite part of this was it's such a great example of how the left uses the word misinformation.
There you go. That's why
she says this is misinformation, and it is actually just something she doesn't like, a news story she doesn't like that came out.
And then she was then she was found to be the misinformer herself.
Yes, exactly.
And yeah, so I thought that was real good, real helpful, real good.
Up next, we have our Inside the News.
Oh, yeah.
News. So we mentioned, and this is a sort of follow-up file, we talked last week about the New York Times' executive editor, Joe Kahn, doing interviews with news outlets, two news outlets that were not the New York Times. He did one with the Wall Street Journal and one with Semafor, essentially crapping on New York Times reporters and saying that they gotta toughen up and not be so crazy and left-wing. So, Semafor now reports New York Times staff complain of, quote, unwillingness to tolerate dissent.
Yes.
This is a great pot kettle
Yes.
piece. In a draft note shared with Semafor, staff said Kahn's comments were, quote, broad generalizations that reflect a poor understanding of the people who make up your newsroom. Further, staff said they felt there were actually fewer opportunities for an exchange of ideas and argued that a diverse pool of perspectives was, quote, needed to protect not just the independence but also the empathy of our journalism.
Oh,
I don't
boy.
know. I have a feeling that the diverse pool of perspectives is not actually what they're after.
The empathy of our journalism is
Yeah.
it should be a banished, a forbidden phrase.
And the best part of this is that one of the things Kahn was talking about in these interviews were that staffers at the Times had leaked their complaints and displeasure about
Israel coverage.
in particular about the Times did a big piece, Screams Without Words, about Hamas's rape of Israeli, both women and men. And they ran to The Intercept and did a big piece, and the Times conducted a big internal investigation about who was leaking and said this is not appropriate. And so what do the Times employees do? They go leak their displeasure to Semafor.
I've been very impressed by Kahn. I think he's tried to draw a line in the sand here in his interviews with both Semafor and the Wall Street Journal. Now, can he avoid getting Chris licked? Because now he knew that when he made these comments that they would incite backlash like this. Now the question is, can he steady it, right? Can he make it stick? And the way that you would make it stick if you were giving him media advice is, now you have to shut up for a while, right? You did these 2 interviews, you did it. Now you can't just keep courting controversy or talking about how you're going to change everything. You have to actually now go quiet and deliver on that, because he's laid down his marker and now he's got to make it stick. Because if the revolt gets bigger and bigger, his boss, Sulzberger, will say, you've really become too controversial. You come to undermine the actual message. So now is the put up or shut up time.
Agree. And the Times had this interesting report about NBC News and about the tension between MSNBC and NBC. The headline is How MSNBC's Leftward Tilt Delivers Ratings and Complications.
It's a good piece.
NBC's traditional political journalists have cycled between rancor and resignation that the cable network's partisanship, a regular target of Mr. Trump, will color perceptions of their straight news reporting. Local NBC stations between the coasts have demanded again and again that executives in New York do more to preserve NBC's nonpartisan brand, lest MSNBC's blue state bent alienate their red state viewers. Nothing did more to signal that MSNBC was more tightly embracing its partisan direction than the decision to hire Jen Psaki and another Biden aide, Simone Sanders, straight from the White House. It was the kind of revolving door hiring that liberal pundits used to criticize when it happened with Fox News and the Trump administration. It also created an awkward situation for the NBC News White House team, which was caught off guard when word that Ms. Psaki was in talks for the job leaked while she was serving as White House press secretary. my view of this is sort of that the problem comes, and the article does get at this, in the cross-pollination between NBC and MSNBC, which confuses the two brands. And they talk about how they had Chuck Todd doing an everyday show, Meet the Press Daily, on MSNBC, and it confused the brand of what was Meet the Press. Was it this MSNBC show, or was it the flagship Sunday show? And then you'll take like an Andrea Mitchell and put her on NBC News.
Right.
And so
synergy is the enemy.
To my eye, like, nobody thinks of Savannah Guthrie and the Today Show hosts as the crazy left-wing MSNBC people.
Right.
Or Rachel Maddow as a serious reportorial, like, heavyweight of NBC News. I think the real, like, to the extent that they don't draw a hard line between the two of them and allow people to cross back and forth, like, that's where they're getting into trouble.
Well, I recall at Fox that the membrane between Fox News and the Fox broadcast affiliates across the country was thick, right? It was, they had only very seldom and usually very carefully, usually it was only Shepard Smith. Very seldom did they take Fox News channel personnel and put them on the locals for this very reason, right? That you don't want to get the chocolate and the peanut butter. But this paragraph delighted me. MSNBC hosts, for their part, view their role in the political debate as more important than ever. Oh, well, who really? They dismiss the accusation that MSNBC is a, quote, Fox News for Democrats, and say their message that Mr. Trump's candidacy represents a unique and clear threat to democracy is an urgent one for the electorate to hear. Well, let me let you in on something, MSNBC hosts. Your viewers already agree with you. There's no one watching MSNBC who's like, I like Donald Trump and I think he's okay. But what does MSNBC what does Ari Melber have to say about this? Because maybe I'm going to think differently. This is not, and it absolutely is Fox News for Democrats. It absolutely is Fox News for Democrats. The Republicans that they have on MSNBC are frequently like the Democrats that Fox News finds, which are tinged with self-loathing for their own party, that come on to agree with how bad the other, like, oh, I hate to say it, but it's the Jen Rubin effect, right? Even conservatives say that Donald Trump is the worst. And then on Fox, you get even Democrats say Biden's in big trouble. I believe the term is the house goy that I have heard to describe that kind of thing. I wrote in my book, and we've talked here a bajillion times, siloed media leads to audience capture. And audience capture means that you cannot upset or bother your audience. So you get a long stream of feel-good stories about hating the other side or whatever else. And that's what MSNBC is doing. I don't know what kind of revenue MSNBC generates for NBC Universal. I don't know what it's worth, but the brand damage is real, right? And just in the same way that local Fox affiliates have to deal with the fact that Fox is in their name, and they have to worry about that with Democratic viewers who just want the traffic and weather together. NBC has more on the line because they have the evening news. That is, and I assume the Today Show makes astonishing piles of money for NBC. I assume it is a crazy cash cow. And MSNBC does represent Jeopardy for those things.
Chris, I saw this story and really enjoyed it.
Okay.
The Wall Street Journal had a feature on a podcast, and the headline was, "The smartest people in the room are all listening to the same podcast."
Is it Ink Stained Wretches?
Alas.
Alas.
Alas, it was not a profile of our podcast.
That would have been a lot cooler.
It is called Acquired.
Okay.
And they release about once a month. They are very, very long episodes that tell the stories of great businesses. And the Journal writes, once they pick a company, the process of making an episode takes 6 weeks from start to finish. Acquired isn't just another podcast with two guys and a microphone.
Whoa.
What?
Whoa. There's nothing wrong with two guys and a microphone.
I mean, all right, well, 6 weeks per episode. Gilbert and Rosenthal become experts on these companies. They see themselves more like historians than journalists, but they're interviewing former employees in addition to reading, watching, and listening to any material they can get their hands on. They take a month to learn everything they possibly can before reporting back with the best stuff they found. And I will say, so my husband started listening to their big episode on Nintendo, the business of Nintendo, and I have been listening to the one on Walmart.
Okay, I would listen to that.
Which led me to buy Sam Walton's autobiography.
Oh yeah.
Because they base it a lot on that.
I read that long ago.
And I've been really enjoying it.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm going to give it a try.
But
I'm
the
going to
piece
give
is
it a
great.
try. All right, way to go, Wall Street Journal.
Piece is great.
Oh, my friend Sam Feist, who was at CNN for, I did not know this, an astonishing 33 years, is going to go be the big cheese at C-SPAN. And first, congratulations to Sam Feist. But then it made me think about, okay, what's C-SPAN going to be? What is C-SPAN going to do? And I think the world has come around to my way of thinking substantially, that cameras in Congress has been a real disaster, right? Those committee hearings. So my position, just for people who have never heard me say it, having a fixed camera on the floor of the House and Senate, fine. You want to do it, that's fine. Those cameras in those committee hearings, televising those committee hearings has been an unmitigated disaster because they're just performance and the questions are not, it's really a mess. But what C-SPAN does that other people don't do very often is host interesting discussions, right? They do their book interviews, their panel discussions, that kind of stuff that you're not going to see other places. And I think with Sam's background and experience, he and his connections in Washington, he will be in a good position to bring more, because, C-SPAN, everybody with a cable subscription is funding C-SPAN. A penny of your cable bill goes to fund C-SPAN. It's funded by the cable providers. And I think it's an underutilized platform, and I think it can do a lot of good stuff. And I'm rooting for Sam and hoping that they find ways to innovate and bring more actual public affairs kind of television to television.
Okay. Chris, that brings us to our facile file. First up.
Oh, baby.
This is all you.
Oh, baby.
The reported rise in maternal mortality rates in the U.S. is largely due to a change in measurement.
Okay, here was the headline from National Public Radio in a piece from July 4th, 2023, so last summer. Headline, U.S. maternal deaths keep rising. Here's who's most at risk. Who do you think it is?
Okay.
Who is most at risk?
I have a sneaking suspicion.
Who is most at risk? And while the study found mortality rates remain, quote, unacceptably high among all racial and ethnic groups in the U.S., the worst outcomes were among Black women, Native American, and Alaska Native people. The study looks at state-by-state data and and on it goes. And that is exacerbated in populations that have been historically underserved or for whom structural racism affects them greatly. So the cause of the problem, we were told, is structural racism. So this week, we hear from Our World in Data. The rise in reported maternal mortality rates in the U.S. is largely due to a change in measurement. And this is a smart, good, useful piece. And I'm not trying to pick on NPR. I'm not trying to, they didn't know that they were wrong. It wasn't a lie. But what happened was that over a period of years, states phased in a more accurate way to measure maternal mortality rates. What gets counted as maternal mortality and what doesn't. And how morbidity and mortality statistics are very hard because they require consistent reporting. We learned this in COVID. What is a death from COVID? What is a death with COVID? How are emergency room doctors, how are people in crisis situations coding deaths leads to these statistics. So what happened between, as Our World in Data points out, between 2003 and 2017, state by state, because that's where these numbers are measured, implemented a new system to try to catch more infant mortality deaths or maternal mortality deaths so they'd have better reporting. This was not just, and it's not just NPR, a lot of places did this story. Oh my gosh, look at this rise in maternal mortality. And then, of course, and you know, the old joke, world ends, women, minorities, hardest hit. And by failing to ask the next question, and it's just something that I will bore you with every week, probably, which is when you dive into the data pool, ask a lot of questions and test your assumptions. How was the poll conducted? What is the source of this data? What are the potential problems with the data? And explore. And the shortcut of here's some statistics, looks like a big jump, dive right in, leads you to this kind of reporting. So I just found this to be a fascinating facileness about too good to check, here are the numbers, do it. And then, you know, like the honeybees, 10 years later, people go, actually, you know, we looked it up. And as it turns out, that's not what happened.
All right. This was like right down the middle of the plate for me.
Yes, both of our interests in facileness are being served this week.
A feature. The Bachelor promises true love. So why does it rarely work out? Of
Why?
the 40 combined seasons of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, only 8 couples have stayed together. We spoke to former contestants and leads about roadblocks to a happy ending. I mean, does seem like the perfect recipe for marital bliss. It's hard to figure out why this might not
Why does
be
it rarely
a perfect reflection of real life.
Why does it rarely work out? I don't know. And by the way, I don't know if the piece explores this fully, but you're starting out with a pretty tainted sample, right? The people who are participating in this show are people who are willing to get naked in hot tub, people who are willing to participate in a television show that requires a test for sexually transmitted diseases as a part of your qualifications, who are willing to abase themselves publicly for this.
Well,
You're already starting
this
there.
gets at it. Contestants are isolated and singularly focused on gaining the affections of one target. The competition makes it hard for contestants to know if they even like the lead. Rycroft got engaged to the Bachelor Jason Mesnick at the end of his season before he broke it off instead to be with the season's runner-up. They have built him up as this amazing bachelor, Rycroft said, adding, I finished this process not knowing a lot about him because I was more interested in making sure he wanted me and didn't want to reject me than going through the process going, are you the one I want to be with? Cameron agreed. You kind of look past the red flags and the signs that it won't work, he said, because you want it to work for what you think it could be because of how great or fun the show makes it seem on the other side. And they have to hide the fact that they're engaged for several months while the show airs. So, oh my gosh, so funny.
This is another one that could have had that could have had the headline in one word or a very short answer. The Bachelor promises true love. So why does it rarely work out? The answer, because it's a reality TV show.
Yeah.
That's why, New York Times.
All right, up next, the Financial Times asks, could ketamine be the next fix for workplace depression? I didn't know there was such a thing as workplace depression, but sounds right.
Well, I don't know what you'll be doing at the Free Beacon or whether we're going to start making ketamine available to Colin and Nate during Ink-Stained Wretches. But the clickbait, the facileness of this piece really got me because right now there's a big vogue around hallucinogens as treatment for depression and all of this stuff. And so here's the Financial Times, the toniest of all newspapers, the plummiest of all newspapers, asking the preposterous question, could ketamine be the next fix for workplace depression? Yeah, no, The employers are not going to start saying, "Oh, are you not enjoying your job? Are you not feeling it? Have you tried tripping? Have you tried a K-hole?" And then on the other side, you're going to come back and you're going to feel totally different about your TPS reports. Come on. Come on.
All right. That brings us to our style section. This was great. Do pimple patches work?
Okay.
From the New York Times. I'm a huge fan of these things.
What are they?
They are these clear little patches.
Okay.
I guess sometimes they're not clear, but that you put on a zit
And they suck
and you can sleep in it.
Okay.
And I think they totally work.
Okay.
And they even have ones for just when you feel it coming.
Okay.
It's like the
sub
warning system. Yeah. They have one for that. And so the Times article basically asks if they're BS. It says, pimple patches are simply bandages that are meant to be placed over pimples. They're typically lined with hydrocolloid, an absorbent gel-forming material that medical professionals have used for decades as a wound dressing. And they basically conclude some are more effective than others. And there are ones that have these little, like, not needles, but, like spiky things on them. So it says the microneedle patches may penetrate the skin and deliver acne treating ingredients better than other types of patches. So these are the better ones. But they can also potentially be more irritating. There's some literature to support the safety and efficacy of microneedle patches for pimples, but time will tell their effectiveness in a clinic. According to Dr. Barbieri, the medicated and microneedle patches are probably not any more effective than the hydrocolloid-only version. The hydrocolloid works great on its own. I think they both work.
All right. I stipulate for the record, my addition to the style section this week is also from the New York Times. And it's about the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. And I just loved it so much. I loved it so much. It could have been my favorite. My favorite for the photography, for the interviews, the photographs of these dogs. Are you a dog person?
No.
Non-dog? Are you a cat person? You're non-animals in your house person? Well, I love dogs. I love dogs. And this is such a charming piece, and the photography is so great. And what they do is they follow, the Times took the resources to follow these animals as they're making their way to New York. So have you ever seen the movie Best in Show?
Of course.
So it's got great energy. How many kimonos do you need? It's got great Best in Show energy as they follow these folks as they come in for the big show, and it's really darling. And there's a dog named Buddy Holly, a petite Basset Griffin Vendine, and I would just call him a scruffopotamus would be the way that I would describe him, who is the most adorable, most charming creature, and I just love this whole piece so much. It's way to go.
That brings us to our obsessions of the week.
Time to obsess.
We break down the stories we can't get out of our heads. I yesterday was obsessing over the national news, okay? In the Washington Post, it is an AP piece published in the Washington Post. Interior Department staffer becomes first Jewish Biden appointee to publicly resign over war in Gaza. And the subheadline repeats the headline. An Interior Department staffer on Wednesday became the first Jewish political appointee to publicly resign in protest of U.S. support for Israel's war in Gaza. Lily Greenberg Call, a special assistant to the chief of staff in the Interior Department, accused President Joe Biden of using Jews to justify U.S. policy in the conflict. So I read this and thought, there's a person no one has ever heard of, in a job no one has ever heard of, who resigned from the administration, and somehow we are getting national news coverage of this. So I started Googling this woman to find out who is she, how representative is she, and these are the results that I got. Lily Greenberg call. Jewish teen trains peers as feminist advocates. Lily Greenberg Call was always passionate about the political process. As a high school freshman, she looked forward to her class on international politics and guerrilla warfare. Though most of the other students in the class were seniors or boys, Call was unfazed. But during a heated discussion, someone said, "No one cares about your opinion, Lily. You're a girl." So she became a feminist activist.
Sounds right.
Teen Vogue. Why I cut ties with this pro-Israel lobbying group. And it's her Jeremiah against AIPAC.
Oh, boy.
And this was published in Teen Vogue in 2022. So clearly, her this person is representative of the Jewish community at large.
They found one.
Unbelievable to me that this generated national news coverage.
They've been waiting. She is the one that they were waiting for. My obsession is in new data from the Pew Research Center as part of their initiative with the Knight Foundation that studies journalism. And these are the most recent numbers on local news consumption. I find very interesting so local news is the winner, the survivor of the devastation in the news business in a lot of ways. And you see, for example, that the trust level is much higher at a time when many local news outlets are struggling and Americans' trust in the news media is waned. The vast majority of U.S. adults, 85%, say local news outlets are at least somewhat important to the well-being of their local community. That includes 44% who say journalism is extremely or very important to their community. About 7 in 10 U.S. adults say that local journalists in their area are mostly in touch with the community, up from 63% who said this in 2018. And most Americans also say that their local news organizations are doing well in 4 key roles: reporting news accurately, covering the most important stories, being transparent, and keeping an eye on local political leaders. There's a lot to be encouraged by in here. And we've chronicled here many of the vicissitudes of local news and the struggle for local news organizations to stay afloat and what happens in communities when local news goes away. What people in the news business should take away is there is a huge market and only getting bigger for good local news. And one of the things that I like most about being at News Nation is that News Nation is an outgrowth of local news, right? The Nexstar, the parent company, owns all of these affiliates across the country. And the idea of News Nation was to have something to do with all of the product that they're producing and all of the resources down there for a national audience. Bottom up is way better than top down. And I would just encourage anybody who is an ink-stained wretch, read the numbers, see what's in there. There is a huge appetite for this, and it is the place where the trust is the least broken. Do you know one of the main reasons why the trust is less broken? It is not abstract. It is in person. It's there. There is real accountability. If you say something is true that's not true, you're going to hear about it. The audiences are smaller and there's greater accountability. But here's another thing that does it. And I say this, I'm speaking against self-interest here. How much politics does local news do? Very little. Very little. The local news does politics at election time. They may host a candidate debate. They may do whatever. But they don't do much politics, right? When they cover government, they're usually doing prudential questions. They cover the courts when there's trials. They cover crime. They may cover the city council's decision. They may cover this, but they don't do the kind of Punch and Judy, red team, blue team politics that tends to dominate the national news. And that's part of the reason why. Politics and political coverage, I should be, and I've said it many times before, I should be like the weatherman, right? occasionally you say, okay, what's going on with the wacky weather, Chris? What's going on over there? You got any polls? You got any information about the election? That's what politics should be. But it should not be, and this goes to the problem at Fox, this goes to the problem at MSNBC. Politics is not the point of having a country, right? We have politics to have a country. We don't have a country to have politics. And by the idolatry, the idolization of politics in news, it diminishes trust inherently. So there you have it.
Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is reader mail. And this is a great letter. We have a note from Wally Thurman at North Carolina State University.
The name is great.
He writes,
I'm already a fan.
Hi, Eliana and Chris. I love your podcast. It's the only one I listen to as soon as it drops. So thanks. Last week, you reported that after years of doom and gloom regarding honeybees, a new, more optimistic view now appears in places like the New York Times. When colony collapse disorder became the environmental calamity du jour around 2010, my agricultural economist colleague Randy Rucker and I started looking at the data from the beekeeping industry. Our conclusion, there was no honeybee crisis. See the op-ed we published in a June 2011 issue of the Wall Street Journal.
He kept the receipts.
He's linked it. We tried at the time to dispel the fear that dominated media coverage, e.g. Time magazine's 2013 cover, A World Without Bees, also attached, but resistance to the tsunami of disasterism was futile. It's good to see some correction to the story, albeit more than a decade late. Wretch on.
I dig it,
Great
Professor. That is great, and it's something I've written about before, and so I love that the reach of wretchedness is so great that we've traced the bee story back to its origins, and we are grateful to you, Professor.
And we also have a note from John
the
Gaspari
baseball
from
people.
Walpole, Massachusetts. And we got a similar note from Mike Lutz in Pittsford, New York. And they write, Chris, great podcast, but let me be the 100th person to point this out. On this week's Wretches, you said Pee Wee Reese said, hit 'em where they ain't. Nope, it was Wee Willie Keeler.
Okay, baseball nerds. I've gotten this wrong before. You have corrected me before, and I think it is possible that I, on some hillbilly stubborn level underneath, am only doing it to troll you. I'm not intentionally misattributing Wee Willie Keeler's quote, but I do stand corrected, and I do apologize, and I just know that don't mess with the baseball nerds. And this week on The Hill Sunday, watch it at 10 a.m. Enjoy on News Nation or on your local affiliate, whatever time it airs. George Will be on the panel. And whenever I think about baseball nerds, I remember George Will. And I remember that many of the baseball nerds are good people. So that when I wish to have wrath for the baseball nerds, I instead submit humbly to the corrections. So thank you, Misters Gaspari and Lutz. I stand corrected.
Chris, that brings us to your favorite time of the week, where I am forced to say something nice. But as always, please lead me by example.
Well, this is right on the money for the Wretch audience, which is the piece that Brian Gallagher wrote for the New York Times, Fast Food Forever, How McHaters Lost the Culture War. And it's a business story that tracks McDonald's astonishing success after a period of time around the turn of the century when it seemed like maybe they were going down. Now, this has particular resonance for me because they twig off of the movie Super Size Me. Do you remember the movie Super Size Me?
Of course.
Okay, so Morgan Spurlock is also a West Virginian, and he achieved astonishing success with this documentary that he made, and it was popular because it was in the zeitgeist, but also because it was at a time when low-budget indie kind of Michael Moore stuff was really hitting, right? And it was, as filmmaking got cheaper and a lot of stuff. And the premise of the movie was that Morgan Spurlock ate only McDonald's for a month and went to the doctor, and they said, you're going to die. And it was, of course, malarkey, right? the idea that anybody would say, I can go to any restaurant, but particularly a hamburger stand, and eat anything I want. And part of the gimmick was anytime they asked him if he wanted to supersize it, he did it. So whatever he wanted, he had to do whatever the clown told him. Whatever corporate food told him he had to do it. He couldn't just get the salad. And he gained all this weight, and his triglycerides went up, and it was this thing. And so there was a moment in the culture that the Times piece very helpfully lays out about McDonald's became synonymous in the early 21st century mode. McDonald's became the story of everything that was wrong with America, right? McJobs, McMansions, it's bad for you. It became a shameful thing. It became like smoking cigarettes. And people have written about this, that it became a shameful thing for college education, for the broad elite, for the top 2 quintiles of the American public to say that you went to McDonald's. It was like saying that you had just smoked a pack of Cools. And how this piece very helpfully breaks down what McDonald's did with the threat. And it was really good advice, which was at the beginning, they were looking for ways to rebut the claims that Morgan Spurlock and their critics were making. What are we going to do about these claims to emphasize that we're healthy? And they talked to the advertising agency that counseled McDonald's, and they said, don't listen to the haters.
No, you cannot play defense.
Don't play defense.
No way.
Find the people who love you, right? This is a podcast in which we have consumed a grimace shake on camera. We have had a McRib tasting. What McDonald's did was lean into its brand and who it was. And the concept, the secret sauce about McDonald's is wherever you go in America or wherever you go in the world, there will be a McDonald's there, and it will be consistent. Now, there are bad McDonald's. It's not Burger King, like, inconsistent, but there are bad McDonald's, no question. Some are better than others. But generally speaking, anywhere you go in the world, from a truck stop in Nagadocious to Spain, if you find a McDonald's, you know what it's going to be there, and you know that you can get and I'm going to say it, nourishing, nutritious meal consistently at these places. And they won the battle. And this is it's a fascinating piece. And when we think about what is the American brand, instead of being ashamed that America is associated with McDonald's, Americans should feel good that so many people around the world have been fed and satisfied by McDonald's. And no, Morgan Spurlock, you cannot have a grimace shake 3 times a day and 3 large fries.
And all the pictures look so good.
I know.
Oh, they really look awesome. All right, my favorite item is not as fun, but was very interesting. It is a Semafor piece from Jay Solomon, how Princeton got burned by its outreach to Iran.
Oh, yeah.
And it is about Iran's kidnapping of 2 Princeton University graduate students and what came before that, which were efforts on the university's part to establish a relationship with Iran. They have a former Iranian spokesman working as a professor at Princeton, and it is fascinating and a long piece about all of Princeton's efforts and the thanks that were repaid by the Islamic Republic. I highly recommend it.
It was interesting.
That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have a story that you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink-Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.